Hi, hello everyone. Akanksha, am I audible properly?
Yes, you are.
Cool, great. So, good afternoon and good morning to everyone joining us from across the world. Some of you may remember me from Session 1 yesterday, but for those just joining, my name is Devayan. I'm a practicing urban planner, designer, and architect, currently based in Frankfurt, and I'm delighted to be your host for this final session of Infinitum 2.0. So, over the past day, we have heard rich and inspiring perspectives from speakers across the globe, all reflecting on one shared theme: co creating cities. Our discussions have been highlighting three powerful pillars: connect, create, and catalyze. Yesterday in session 2, we explored the connect theme primarily through case studies from the US and Asia. Earlier today in session 3, we delved into the create theme, especially through perspectives from the Asian context. And now, in our final session, we turn to the third and concluding pillar, catalyze, from urban experiments to lasting impacts. Today's session will highlight how right systems, policies, and practices can transform co created ideas into resilient urban realities. Our eminent speakers joining us from Germany, the UK, and India will share how catalytic thinking has shaped their work, enabling ideas to grow, adapt, and create lasting impact in cities through the world. Before we dive in, a quick reminder to all attendees, please feel free to drop your thoughts and questions in the Zoom chat box at any point during the session. We will be taking them up during the Q&A towards the end. Now, to open today's conversation, I'm pleased to introduce Professor Jürgen Happ, our first speaker for the session. Jürgen is currently a professor of urban design at the Technical University of Applied Sciences, Würzburg. He brings deep experience from academia and global practice. Since 2016, he has been part of Albert Speer and Partners, serving as associate partner and head of urban design international. He is also currently an independent advisory partner at ASP. His design philosophy embraces a holistic approach, shaping adaptable, versatile spaces that respond to real world needs. His journey includes over a decade at Foster and Partners and Arup in the UK, and he has been involved in award-winning master plans and architectural projects across the Middle East, Europe, and beyond. We are very excited to hear from you, Jürgen. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Debayan, and I'm thrilled to be invited to your conference. So yeah, let me share my slides, and just briefly, I was just quite thrilled by the title Catalyze, because at the end of the day, what we are doing as urban designers, urban planners, is really catalyze, and we enable others to fulfill their dreams as people, as residents, but also we enable real change in our cities. We actually do enable also growth of cities and so on. So I thought actually I wanted to make first a run through a lot of projects, but then I thought actually it's quite timely that we have this conference, because as Debayan said, we are sitting in Frankfurt, and some of you may know Frankfurt, but many of you don't. Frankfurt is known for its high-rise and its old buildings, and it's a historical city with a lot of things in it. That's a stereotypical image. But actually, I believe there is much more to Frankfurt, and I would like to explore that briefly before I dive into some of our projects. For me, first of all, actually, Frankfurt is the perfect city, as Cedric Price described it, the city as an egg. Frankfurt actually did evolve as a boiled egg. It was actually multi-layered at the beginning. It had these city walls. It had actually a couple of city walls. Then in the 17th and 19th century, in the industrialization, it grew and it became basically the fried egg, and then later it became a scrambled egg. And you see that here, actually, that's an image of 1840, actually, just before the Industrial Revolution really started to kick in. You really still see, actually, most of Frankfurt was still in the city limits, actually, of the medieval city. Actually, the first core of the city was actually somewhere around here, and then there was the medieval city, and eventually the Baroque city bastion was built around. And even in 1840, the city wasn't even completely filled up within, let's say, the inner ring. When we look at now 1845 to 1860, still you see just the city has been filled up in the city inner areas, but then just a bit outside. And you see also the settlements outside are not quite developed yet. Moving forward 150 years afterwards, and here we do have actually the scrambled egg situation. It's actually an agglomeration of multiple cities and places. It's approximately 2.5 to 3 million people, even though Frankfurt itself has only 780,000 people. But actually, you could say it's the perfect 15-minute city, because you can easily reach from any place of Frankfurt itself to the core of the city within 15 minutes when you take a bike. And large endeavors have been done actually to get there. And it's not just us saying it, it's a 15-minute city. It's even a magazine that's so remote and so distant, I believe, actually, of urban design practice, like the Financial Times, actually just a couple of years ago said, actually, it's the perfect 15-minute city. And of course, there wasn't any planning in that sense behind to make it a 15-minute city. It just grew out of very good principles, very compact, very dense settlement. But actually, why Frankfurt now is really relevant for us today is actually we are just celebrating 100 years of the so-called New Frankfurt, which was actually a movement in 1925. Hardly anyone internationally, I believe, knows about it, but I believe actually it's much more influenced than in our topic than the Bauhaus ever was. So it was a movement to renew the city. There was a lot of social problems plied within the city, unhygienic situations within the inner city area. And so in 1925, this initiative started by the mayor of Frankfurt, and he got the city planner, Ernst May, to really initiate that change. So as I said, it's similar and at the same time as Bauhaus, but I believe actually much more relevant for our topic than the Bauhaus was. And it's, you see it here, it's similar in style. It also had its own magazines, and it really broadcasted its ideas. But it didn't just think about urban design and settlements. It even went so far to think about the Autobahn system, the highway system in Germany. So you could even start tracing that back. The Nazis later on, which brought an end to the New Frankfurt, actually took over some of these ideas, actually, such as the Autobahn. But also it started to think about regional planning and how to connect actually the areas around Frankfurt into a larger ecosystem. And that's actually what we are still driving and thriving through in the region. But you see here just a map of how distributed all those initiatives were, and which really started to catalyze the change of Frankfurt as a place, and that started the transformation, and which we are still leveraging off today. But one of the settlements which I like very particularly is, for instance, the Römerstadt, which is in the north of Frankfurt, actually was initiated close to 100 years ago. And it was actually to solve the issue of affordable housing for many people, for most people, and to really give them quality of life with even closer connection to landscape. And it's absolutely in opposite, I believe, actually, to, for instance, Le Corbusier's Radiant City. Le Corbusier might have been a very good architect, but as an urban planner and city planner, I don't believe he was that great. As I said, the Neue Frankfurt is here much more influential. We see here the master plan 100 years ago, which I believe is actually, we can still see we are using most of the tools today on how we derive frontages of the buildings, streets, scapes, landscape all together, and how we think about the city. And what also was quite interesting was an extreme modularization and standardization. We keep talking about it today, but it's really nothing new. It was invented, or it was done already 100 years ago. Of course, it wasn't even then new. We always have these ideas of standardization in the urban environment. But what was new here was, at least for Germany, to get also the people the chance to access to landscape. The townhouses and attached houses had gardens by themselves. Those who lived in apartments had then their allotments in front of the settlement. And that actually initiated the idea of a green belt, which is wrapping around Frankfurt today. So again, this development and the ideas coming out of it started a catalytic process. And today we are actually leveraging of this beautiful green belt, which is highly in regards cyclist walking and so on around the city of Frankfurt. But of course, it also is a child of its time. It has the architecture language. And here we can trace back the connection to the Bauhaus with its formal language of the buildings. And all those buildings are, of course, already grade 8 listed. But one thing which also came out of this is, for instance, our modern days kitchens. Hardly anyone knows, but it can be traced back to the Neue Frankfurt, that the modularization and the economic way of how we design, at least here in Europe, our kitchens can be traced back to that time and should be traced back to this settlement, which is also, I believe, quite influential. Another topic which I like quite a lot is our office, Albert Speer and Partners, or early in the 80s, started the process of the Museumsufer, the museum's edge along the River Main here in Frankfurt. And it was utilized, the river was utilized as a catalyst for culture and events. Out of this master plan came, for instance, the idea to initiate more linkages, actually linkages which are so intuitive nowadays, but it wasn't there 40 years ago. So it came back to an urban design process and master plan, and it's one of the highest and used bridges we have here in Frankfurt. But of course, you have also one thing, for instance, a couple of museums, quite a lot of highly ranking museums along the museum's edge. And here is, for instance, Richard Meyer's the Museum of Applied Arts directly at the River Main. But what is more, and here you see also the German architecture museums of Ungers, which just reopened after being renovated for 4 years. But what I believe is actually much more important is the status within the city. Every year there is a museums festival, and this whole place transforms into just heaving people's place. The shores of the river will be turned into a festival area, and it's really a delight to see how 40 years later, after this master plan initially was thought about, it has become its own brand even. So people have really used that idea of the museum's bay or Museumsufer, and now it's a trademark. All museums here in Frankfurt are trading under the Museumsufer. Another one, fast forward, a project of ours now in, for instance, Saudi Arabia is the idea of Misk City, where we've started the process of creating this creators place. It's about enabling young Saudis for their entrepreneurial skills and setting up business, but also to become a place of arts and culture. And we were very respectful. We had this setting along the Wadi Hanifa, and where we said actually here there is a cliff edge, and we were very respectful of it. We said actually nothing to touch it, no infrastructure, nothing. But one building we said should enable us to connect down. Here in the back we have a bridge which also connects down and gives universal access into the body bed. And here we put the Arts Institute as a catalytical project for the first phase of the development. And here we see how later than the architect Anne Holtrop turned that into an architect's representation of this Arts Institute that really gets carved into the mountain and provides connection between the lower bed of the body and the upper plateau. And here you see also the connection across the body, and again from the promenade down. And it's currently being constructed, and we believe actually it will be a very catalytic. It will become an icon for its own right, but not because of its size and height, but just how we place the setting actually, and how the architecture starts to communicate with the landscape. And that was an image of February 2025, and soon, or next year, I believe it will be open. Coming back to Frankfurt, another point was we were tasked 4 years ago or 5 years ago to redefine or refine the silhouette of Frankfurt with additional high-rise structures, and so to redo or further develop the high-rise master plan. One thing we should know, and it's I believe actually quite important for us as urban designers, we are always stepping into someone else's work from before. And it's nicely illustrated with this timeline. Unfortunately, it's most in German, but the timeline you can see. Of course, we are only part of a larger process, and we see ourselves as working in tandem with what has been done before us to where we are now. Frankfurt has the principles of creating clusters for the high rises, and we saw ourselves as consolidating today these clusters. So we looked at those predominant clusters where we believed actually there is most consolidation required, especially in the banking quarter, and develop principles around how the high-rise can interact within its neighborhoods. And of course, we looked at the lighting levels, the air ventilation, public transport integration, public realm, the usage, especially along the ground floor, the height levels and the silhouette, the heritage status, and then, of course, how we reach each of those high rises. And we said actually the high rise and the community around need to have really a symbiotic relation. And so we, a bit like Kevin Lynch, started to create our guiding principles in these maps where we said actually where are the connections, where are the places, where are the clusters, and how do we define our master plan. We then started to look much more closer into some of these connections and how the utilization of public realm in simultaneous with the high rises can really create a redefinement of the place and create something additional to the silhouette of Frankfurt, and but more importantly to the spaces of Frankfurt, and here the public realm especially. And then only then we started to really think about the height and the shape of those high rises. Of course, what was also very important was the multi-use. So we have a layered use approach. According to Jane Jacobs, really the eyes on the street. So we want to have a very busy lower foot of the building. So say the first 5 floors really need to create that eyes on the street functions, while on top we have either offices or living as a predominant use. And that actually then, when we started to look at all those various locations, we started to compose that picture for instance, here of the banking district. That is, of course, also then embedded within a proper process, because as we all know, urban design and urban planning is not just making pretty pictures, but we need to define a good and resilient process in which then everyone who acts in this framework can really do their work. So, for instance, the developers, the architects who come after us. And so we really started to redefine the process of how we think actually good urban integration of those high rises can be done, from the project idea to the feasibility study, the pre-assessment, which also needs to already look at the climatic conditions, public participation, very important now nowadays in Germany. Of course, we need to have an early involvement of the people and the public, and then leading to architecture competitions. Now, if I have still some time, I would just loop into one of those towers, which is actually quite interesting, which starts to join up the idea of urban design enablers, because here this Tower 7, which is called the Gloria Tower, has a very weird shape in our master plan, and I briefly touch on why that was. Now here, and as coming back to our first points, here we have some of the oldest banking buildings still existing. This was an old bank building, and it's not just a nice facade here. This also has a nice inner hall, and that has been preserved even through the Second World War. So it was an absolute imperative to preserve those buildings. So what we came up with was to say, actually, most probably the best would be to have an urban design approach where we say, actually, the plinth building is remained intact. And we also wanted to create a high-rise with a fairly slim foot to also preserve most of the inner areas. There was only, of the 3 plots, there was only 1 plot left, which we could actually rest the high-rise on. That was a building which was heavily destroyed in the Second World War. So here we didn't have preservation status, but here we had a historic street edge, plinth edge, and we needed to preserve that. So we had to 360 degrees get the tower slimmer. So we came up with the idea of this tapering tower, which now you might understand why we came up with this shape. And that was then turned into guidelines for the architects' competition afterwards. So the architects had to fulfill those guidelines, which we've set in our high-rise master plan. And just a couple of months ago, Henning Larsen Architects won the competition. And especially this image, you see how they then started to interpret that, our guideline. Personally, I'm not too happy about the lower part here, but I think they will find a better solution for that. But in general, we are quite happy about that this idea has been directly transformed now into the architecture. And I must say, actually, if it would have been for the heritage department, they would have prevented the building altogether. But then from a high-rise perspective, we said, actually, we should consolidate this whole cluster. And so we, as the urban designers, were able to marry the different aspects and try to find a solution that can be agreed upon by both or by multiple stakeholders. And what's next for us? We believe actually coming back and zooming out again and zooming back to the museum's Ufer. We believe actually the River Main has much more to give, and we believe actually the northern side should as well be reprogrammed and to make this a much more green, blue, and active edge. And here really to create an active backbone for the city and to create a place for recreation and leisure. And we believe actually that could be a quite interesting addition and another enabler for a healthy life and good good lifestyle within the city of Frankfurt. And on that note, I would like to close. Slightly overrun.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Jürgen, for that excellent presentation. So it's very interesting how you actually take us through from Frankfurt to Saudi Arabia and back to Frankfurt. And it kind of shows how master planning and design as an evolving iterative process, balancing incremental interventions with large-scale strategies, is truly thought-provoking. The way you highlighted, I guess, the importance of constant learning and the need to establish a framework that supports adoption and improvement, that's very important. And that's a very valuable lens for all of us on co-creation in the built environment. So with that note, we will now move to a second presentation and will warmly welcome Mr. Mandar Puranik. Mandar brings over 20 years of leadership experience in sustainable urban development, combining policy design and delivery in a truly integrated manner. He has played a key role in fostering public-private partnerships, engaging diverse communities across both urban and rural settings, and consistently leading teams with strategic thinking, innovation, and context-specific designs. He has worked with several local councils in the UK, including Tower Hamlets, Sutton, and East Hampshire, and currently serves as head of regeneration, investment, and jobs at Ealing Council. Thank you, Mandar, for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. That was a really good introduction, and Jürgen, really good slides. I think that sets the good context for what I'm going to talk about, in the sense of, I think understanding Frankfurt from you was really interesting, because I think in London, sort of tackle these aspects from a municipality or city government point of view. So to get that overview of Frankfurt over the last 200 years was really useful. I think for today, and it's conscious of time, and I did listen to yesterday's first session.
Mandar, for interruption.
You can't hear me?
No, we cannot see you if you are sharing something. It's a black screen.
Okay. That's tricky. Give me a minute.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Stage. Sorry about that. I think, what I'm going to say is, I'll just set the context anyways, whilst in the background I'm getting the slides ready.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm going to sort of summarize how in a council or a local authority, the various roles and aspects urban designer can deal with, and what can contribute. My Zoom is struggling for some reason. Okay, let's see. Is it possible to switch speakers, perhaps, if the next speaker is ready?
Yeah, sure. We can do that. So maybe Prachi, if you are ready, we can switch to you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great. So, okay, just let me then give a short introduction. So Prachi, so we welcome our third presenter then first. So welcome Prachi Rampuria. Prachi is the co-founding director at Eco-Responsive Environments, an award-winning urban design and architecture practice based in London. Her work focuses on low-carbon innovation, with the Heath Park Master Plan being a standout project featured in the UK government's Global Investment Atlas, showcased at the Global Investment Summit 2021, and winner of multiple awards, including the Golden Pineapple in 2022. With international experience spanning in the UK, Middle East, India, and Azerbaijan, Prachi's practice embraces the belief that urban design can nurture a meaningful human-nature relationship while being economically and environmentally responsive. She also teaches at Oxford Brookes University and consults with Studio PDP. So thank you, Prachi, for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Debayan. I'll share my screen quickly and let's test. Can you see a PowerPoint?
Yes, it's visible now.
I'll just go to the slideshow version. Thank you, Debayan, and thanks everyone for joining. As Debayan mentioned, I'm Prachi. I'm co-founding director of Eco-Responsive Environments. We are an architectural and urban design practice based in London, in Brixton, and it's great being part of this discussion today. So as a design practice, as a young design practice, we are deeply interested in enabling stakeholders to collaborate, to co-create, and to catalyze healthy placemaking and regenerative urbanism. That has been and continues to be the focus of our work across all projects, whether it is strategic new settlements or expansion master plans, or urban regeneration and high street action plans, even down to social housing intensification. So this presentation will focus on a little bit about kind of the eco-responsive design methodologies that we try to embrace in order to facilitate the development of urban strategies that underpin resilient, inclusive places. It was great hearing from Jürgen, I think, about Frankfurt and about the evolution and transformation. It's really, I mean, one of the key things that came out for me from his presentation was about resilience, how places can be resilient whilst they evolve over long periods of time. So the idea of resilience is very much rooted in the recent book that we published with Routledge. The book is also titled Eco-Responsive Environments, and it is very much a framework. We don't call it, it's a framework for design. We don't call it as a manual or a guidebook, because it basically presents a set of ideas based on empirical research that provides support to resolve or address the current challenges and the emerging challenges of the built environment we all are facing all over the globe. So settlement design is an interdisciplinary subject that is no news to any of us, and it intersects with various fields such as urban planning, architecture, environmental science, sociology, economics, amongst others. Its impacts extends to everyone involved, whether they're landowners, developers, local communities, professional expertise, local authorities, etc. The impacts extends to each one of us, making it a very complex and multifaceted subject. And so focus must be to figure out ways in which we can foster joined up thinking. We can break out of our professional silos and maximize the socio-ecological, as well as the economic benefits to all stakeholders, including end users, within the financial and political constraints that projects function in. And doing that requires a comprehensive understanding of how different disciplines interact and influence each other in order to build effective alliances and placemaking narratives, including the involvement of local communities, existing residents, who kind of know the place the best. They're sort of the local experts, and how they can meaningfully contribute in the process of design and stewardship of places. That's the reason why we try to put together this set of ideas in our book, drawing from various professional fields and disciplines, drawing from the extensive literature available on sustainable and regenerative design, in the manner of theory of everything. So in a lot of ways, the book is kind of new, but not really new, because it does kind of extract a lot of available knowledge, but breaking those concepts down, making it easier for others to access, particularly people from different disciplines, to access concepts of others. The essential idea was to provide a unified framework which combines multiple disciplines into a single comprehensive understanding. And the process of this started about 14 years ago, we basically saw there was a clear divide in both practice and academia between the disciplines of landscape ecology and the rest of the built environment. So to put it forward, we felt that we are thinking about humans and natures as somewhat being separate when they are actually not. And to catalyze the processes that enable healthy placemaking, we need to change that understanding. And so building on our book's predecessor, which was Responsive Environments, published in 1985, this book, Eco-Responsive Environments, focused on reintegrating the principles of human needs, but with a much deeper understanding of natural systems. And this inherently requires an integrated and an inclusive way of thinking. So to create such an inclusive framework to help catalyze urban strategies, it's really important to establish common ground between all stakeholders of the built environment, including the eventual end user of place. And if we think about common ground, whatever their particular interests might be, all designers and users eventually they share a need for survival. And so we drew inspiration from Kate Raworth's donut economics that suggests we must make design decisions for a safe and just space that provides the fundamental needs for all humans, but within the means of the planet. And so this is the book. This is the space in which the book's framework, the book's design framework operates. It addresses the Anthropocene's ever-changing economic and environmental conditions by developing a multi-scalar framework that cuts across regional planning, neighborhood planning, and architecture, and all the disciplines that influence these scales, into a design approach that is responsive to human needs, but also ensures the long-term support from our planet's life support systems. And this is what we call eco-responsive design, as an inclusive framework to catalyze strategies for tomorrow. Within the realm of eco-responsive design, every design task, no matter how big or small it is, inevitably it addresses some unique situation. And that is why design is creative work, isn't it? And to support a nuanced understanding of the site and its unique characteristics, eco-responsive design argues that the design process must encourage, where possible, the involvement and effective integration of the practical knowledge of end users as local experts. So it is very much a meshing of residents and stakeholders with the various professional disciplines and expertise that come together to deliver projects and places over time. And to do that effectively in practice, we adopt a structured design approach and process, which is rooted in a deep understanding of how places work, how they function, starting right from the development of the design brief. So right from kind of like what in the UK we would call like REBA stage 0, eventually down to through planning and down to the construction and delivery of places. Because we do believe that any outcome is only as good as its process. So it's really important to structure and make that process, future-proof that process as much as possible as part of the design evolution. And so to support that, what our book does and what eco-responsive design tries to promote is that it puts forward a structured design approach, which is rooted in the understanding that settlements are complex systems. Every human habitat, no matter how small, no matter how big, it's a complex system. And putting it very simply, it's essentially any place is formed of 4 subsystems. It would form of natural infrastructure, which includes landform, water, and green networks. It's form of public spaces and streets, which give us access. It's form of plots. It's form of buildings. So these are kind of the building blocks of any settlements. And the relative autonomy of the settlement's key subsystems, it has presented obvious opportunities for the necessary professional specialization that we all work within. So the overall field of settlement design, particularly since industrialization and globalization, has focused on developing into a range of specialized disciplines. So, for example, we have landscape architects for natural infrastructure, we have urban designers who kind of like knit the whole thing together. We have traffic engineers for street layouts, architects for buildings, etc., etc. And even though we continue to work within our remits, we must never lose sight of the fact that catalyzing any change in the built environment eventually requires an integrated approach. And very importantly, requires local communities and stakeholders to be involved, because at the end of the day, the end users, they experience the whole built place. They don't experience them in the different layers or subsystems that we think about when we are designing. They don't feel places, and they don't emote with places through things like drawings or computer generated CGIs that we use as a means of the development of the design. So it's really important to use as many techniques as possible in order to embrace an integrated design approach. A lot of the time we see this integration not very visible in design processes. And in particular, the integration of local communities is not very visible. And so one of the questions that we do ask from an eco-responsive design perspective is, how do we bridge the gap? How can we effectively use that local knowledge to catalyze better design? And for us, the trick lies in the sequence of the design development process, something that we've learned through experience of projects of different scales. But we believe that the four subsystems, which inherently change at different rates in time. So, for instance, the landform and water systems are the longest lived. Then the streets, which may change, but typically, particularly the key routes, they last for thousands of years, if not longer. Next, the plots, the land ownership plots may change as well, comparatively faster through amalgamation and subdivision, but they have been seen to last through centuries. And then comparatively building, they change much more faster. So this process of change means that the design decisions of the deeper layers, which don't change or are not prone to change very quickly, must be discussed and fixed at the earliest stages to set the right foundation for the faster changing layers, what constitute as what we call the surface order of places. Otherwise, what it risks is that the development basically inherits kind of fundamental challenges that can be rather irreversible without significant financial implications. So it is really important that when we engage with stakeholders to catalyze development, that we try to broadly follow this sequence. And the relationships between these different layers. Where possible, we have found from practice that breaking the design development into several stages and multiple sessions of engagement with stakeholders is really helpful in line with the structure of the subsystem development and the strategies for each subsystem for that project. In the end, engagement, even if it is within the professional team, it's really important. It is about cultivating relationships, whether it is between consultants, whether it is with the client, whether it is with the stakeholders, whether it is with the end users. You are cultivating relationships through every project, and long-term resilience, and that cultivation requires energy, it requires effort, it requires resources, and it requires a design approach that is rooted in the values of integrity and transparency, so that you can discuss options, and you can discuss what works and what does not work meaningfully through the process of the design evolution. So for instance, three kind of aspects that we have found to be really useful to kind of record as the design evolves are things like elements which there is outright support for, because then we are able to have good rationale for enshrining them as design principles. Which in this case, in this diagram, are the boxes in green. Then elements which get a mixed response through different stakeholders. Which means that they might have issues associated with that particular strategy, but it is possible to resolve them through design. So then you start thinking with the design team, what might the possible solutions be? And thirdly, elements that you, even if you want to, you cannot address. And there are elements like those in design projects as well. And it is important in our view to be honest about that. And if the possibility to address that is only in long term, to try and future proof the design layout to ensure that happens. And so when we are trying to catalyze good design with others and co-create that, it is very likely that we will come across people from other disciplines, and also very likely that we will come across people who are totally non-designers, who, across all age groups and abilities, who are not used to dealing with the complexities of urban planning and design in the way we do. So where possible, having kind of training workshops with such an audience in order to meaningfully integrate them as part of the design evolution, it's important to expose them to the intricacies of what planning involves, what design involves, so that they get a first-hand experience through training workshops of the trade-offs and balances that a design team goes through when trying to understand, oh, this is a better option, or that was a better strategy, or this is perhaps how we may improve, or this is what the limit is of a particular strategy. So in a nutshell, it is important where possible to identify people with local expertise, local knowledge, and to involve them meaningfully as part of an evolving design discussion. So that's how you make inclusive cities, isn't it? Where you involve voices as the design evolves through different stages of design and planning. So to
Sorry,
support that,
sorry, Prachi, for the interruption. Can you please wrap it up in 2 minutes, maybe, because we
yes,
still have two presentations?
this
Sorry.
is the last. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So to support that, basically, the book essentially structures eco-responsive design in 4 chapters according to each of the subsystems. And each chapter then kind of delves deeper into relational or impact parameters that can help catalyze healthy placemaking. So yeah, I think I'll stop on that note, and very happy for us to carry on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prachi, for that thought-provoking presentation. It was truly, I guess, refreshing to see how your work brings the human-nature relationship to the forefront of design, and which is absolutely very, very critical and very relevant for today's context. Now, I guess that kind of also beautifully sets the stage for our fourth speaker today, Miss Dipti Talpare, will carry forward that theme through her work, I guess, rooted in Indian context. So Dipti's journey spans policy, practice, and research with a strong focus on climate resilience, housing, and nature-based solutions. She currently leads urban development and resilience initiatives at WRI India, where she works closely with diverse stakeholders to shape impactful climate adaptation strategies. Her work has influenced city-scale policies and frameworks, particularly in Mumbai, and she brings experience from organizations like GIZ, Aegis India, and even Aga Khan Agency for Habitat. She has also contributed to academia, having taught at Krivia and the School of Environment and Architecture in Mumbai. So thank you for joining us today, Dipti. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Devayan. Thanks for this lovely introduction. Yeah, without taking much time of the audience, since it's a Saturday, I'm sure everyone's wanting to get free earlier. So I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me a second. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's visible now.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I had a lot of plans of showing several projects, but I thought I should kind of focus on one so that the story comes out clearly, because really this particular webinar is around how do you co-create, how do you co-create for impact, obviously, but also, what is the process that you follow? What is the catalytic action? So really trying to kind of show all this sort of process through one side. Where it stems from, this is the Mumbai Climate Action Plan's analysis. We work on, climate action and, understanding climate risks in the city, and then actioning in those areas. So this is an assessment which shows that, over years, there are some wards where the green cover has reduced and urban heat has increased. One such ward also being the M East ward, where we are, where this particular project is located. M East ward is supposed to have the poorest human health index. So, I mean, this is a journey where we are working with NGOs like UVA. We are working with Tata Institute of Social Sciences, who have had a very strong presence there since a long time. And the locations of the sites that we, were trying to kind of understand were through the partnerships of UVA and TIS with the local community there. So these are some of the pictures from the previous, which sites to take. This on the left hand side, you can see this is the level of concreting that is there in Lalubhai compound, and the site that I'm going to speak about is in one of these areas. Where it's basically a greyfield site which was, built over an industrial land, and the kind of open spaces you see on the right hand side, which are more kind of derelict and really not used enough. Also, the impact of heat is very, very high. This triangular plot is really within which we were trying to intervene. And like you can see, previously it was a built sort of an industry. Now it is a housing, rehab and resettlement colony, in which, this triangular patch below that, there is this, huge kind of, what do you call it? The foundation, and the concreting of that foundation still exists. So, so this is where we were planning to implement. Now, what was the challenge? The challenge is, how do you increase for green cover, right? And there are all these actors that we, are kind of trying to bring together on the same page. Also, kind of, having this collaboration with each of them in a manner where each of their kind of visions and mottos are fulfilled. So, for example, the Caterpillar Foundation, who was funding it, was expecting, like, a planting of 8 hectares in the city, which is something that we had to negotiate with. The other is engaging with UVA and TIS, where we wanted to bring the engagement of community in making this space more than just green cover. The third being the entire technical setting that we have with urban designers, biodiversity experts, etc., coming in to look at ecosystems approach for greening. The fourth being the community itself and understanding their local needs, and how do they differ from just like increasing that green cover, like what is their necessity for that area, understanding those. Then there is the BMC, where for them it is to provide, they are looking for space where they can plant, and we are trying to kind of engage with them to see how this planting is not just planting, but more kind of a sensitive process of understanding community participation and principles of biodiversity and ecosystem, etc. So all these departments, participating in that. At the same time, the land belongs to MMRDA, so getting their permissions for executing it. Whereas WRI plays a role of a facilitator, doing the liaisoning, and also becomes a technical advisor for the project to move ahead. So these are some of these, initial conversations which got us to understand what are the local needs of the site. Through the recce with the community, we identified certain plots. I mean, these are 2-3 plots where we engage deeply on. And the center, on the right-hand side, you see this, the center plot where we are seeing a lot of issues in terms of waterlogging, the drains being choked, the solid waste management being a major issue. This is how it looks. The area needs a major upgrade. And this is how the water gets logged, and we want to solve these problems. And during the summers, it's very difficult for anybody to come here. The thermal comfort within indoors is also problematic because of the built environment within the building itself. So what is the place for refuge? And for senior citizens, children, it's almost kind of impossible to kind of come out for any kind of refuge during very hot months. So here we are trying to kind of show this plan of how to move forward. How do you kind of work with the existing governments, at the ward level and through different departments, understanding the local biodiversity over there, so that, the greening that happens is in conjunction with the whole kind of biodiversity. The soil tests and whether, it's a good site to actually plant there. Doing these on-ground engagements with different departments like, maintenance department, garden department, the stormwater drain, the solid waste management. So all these officers are there on site with us, and trying to, which they don't coordinate on a day-to-day basis, seated in the offices. Here they are on site, trying to understand challenges together and resolve for it together. So these are some of the, maps that we had to secure of, what happens underneath, what are the pipelines that go underneath. And eventually we realized that the budgets that we have to actually make this happen on the triangular patch is not enough, because the excavation is going to cost a lot. So eventually we are, we plan to take a smaller kind of a site, which is right behind. And we try to see what is already happening there, where people are already planting smaller kind of plants. And, so we looked at, okay, this is where the strength lies, where there is already some activity. How about leveraging this with the community? We gather, this kind of a NOC and approvals really start, coming in only after like 8 months since the project has started for a 1-year project. So it's before that we are really kind of trying to create training sessions, working with the community to understand how do we go about delivering this, right? So this is, the youth group of the community, and also the children who have taken active role in doing the planting. Now, after all of that, what we see is that it fails, right? There is this whole kind of, okay, we are trying to plant, and with so many permissions, it's just like impossible to, for one plant to be planted and also to sustain it. So then we think about, where and how do we, and obviously the trust then of the community in us to gather all these kind of energies together fails. This is where the whole kind of role of urban design kind of comes in, where we are saying that you don't only kind of plant, but also kind of design the entire space, create programs, have seating, have, areas which are, painted by the community. And all of these kind of, exercises are done with the children, with the women in the areas who are living in that neighborhood, where they come up with certain kind of ideas for how they can participate in the maximum manner. And they start sort of creating this, plugging in and also creating structural ideas which kind of go into this site. And this is how it kind of starts looking. So, from where we had started to now where it is at, and, the whole kind of negotiation game that we have to play to deliver this is the process that I wanted to show. Also, after that, there have been, certain programs like creating study areas or, play areas where, or evening study areas where children come there to study and use that space. Senior citizens come and use that space. So earlier, which was derelict, a lot of substance abuse going on in this area, all of that kind of transforms into actions which are more needed for, needed by the community. So, yeah, going from there, these are the launch. This is how it looks. Now there is a lot of kind of ownership that the community has had for this area. They water their plants. I'd recently visited the site where it's much more grown than what is visible there. And then we are looking at all these similar sort of projects in different parts of the cities. What are the feasibilities of it, etc. Like in Cheetah Camp, similar sort of approach of, greening, but looking at what are the micro greening efforts that can happen at the local area. These are some of the images from there. And so the whole, all of this setup really kind of propelled us to look at, if we need to create more green cover within vulnerable neighborhoods. We had a workshop with platform for academicians, governments. This was actually hosted in the garden department itself, where what is the real need? Like, how can people participate in this process? What we realized is they need more resources and, like knowledge of where to get resources from. How do you create our groups for execution? How do you plan? What are the stages, etc.? And this whole greening manual idea came up. This is again like it became a pro bono sort of exercise where people who are interested through that workshop came ahead and contributed to this. This is a greening manual, which is actually on the BMC's website. It basically offers a lot of knowledge on how do you begin a project in a city like Mumbai, what works, what doesn't work, what are the, different small, medium, and large spaces where, one needs to kind of understand what are the challenges in terms of approvals and in terms of what are the types of green cover that can be implemented. It's got, the idea of what are the ecosystems that you need to be aware of when you're doing this greening project. And it provides a list of all the species of green cover that are necessary to be looked at than looking at, very kind of monoculture plants or vegetation. So it gives that sort of a pathway. But I mean, coming back to this site, this still remains the challenge, right? We've still not solved for that one triangular path, triangular patch. So again, like, there is this funding from Wipro where we start creating a more robust kind of a DPR to understand how and what is the feasibility. We get more partners involved, working in waste management, working in wastewater, etc., to try to create a sponge infrastructure for this project. So looking at all these diverse sort of, biodiversity, water management, waste management, and getting the people together were, the objectives and the directions that are taken. More kind of a detailed audit of waste is done to understand how to begin, what are the strategies for implementation, waste management. Again, there we have workshops where children, women, they are kind of, involved in making this, having a vision for this area and their requirements and needs for that space. And eventually, kind of a DPR is created. So now the DPR kind of has moved from here to the environment department, where, they've kind of adopted this and want to kind of take this project forward. Secure funding for it, and the funding story and procurement process still remains a kind of a huge kind of activity for us, because we still want to have the whole community participation going until the maintenance is taken care of. So so that is the struggle currently that we are in. And like, then how from that one small kind of patch that we looked at in that triangular space, we do kind of start thinking of a more kind of a systemic approach of, increasing green cover in, smaller kind of pockets, creating movements and, creating more shade basically in the space to be able to look at heat more holistically. This again, we've kind of entered through understanding the budgets and seeing what activities in the project align with the existing kind of budget framework of the Tree Authority and Garden Department. And the recent climate budget report also kind of creates that sort of, entity for everyone in the ecosystem to kind of look at how to approach these issues and, solve for issues on ground within vulnerable areas. So, I mean, taking it to the next level, how is impact created is that we are trying to work with urban practitioners in the city, communicate and kind of bring the scale up to understanding how do we do holistic, how do we collaborate and kind of create a very sort of a space where there is a that greening or climate action is not just not just one activity, but a holistic sort of a social activity also that needs to be taken care of. So those workshops, at the same time, there are workshops and training sessions with the government departments, where understanding climate and understanding what are the actions that can be taken up on ground to show impact are also taking place. At the same time, there are workshops with citizens, understanding what role they can play, not only at the site level, but at the city level. And then there are these sporadic, smaller kind of exercises of impact. Exercises of greening that have happened through our partner Yuva, who have gone ahead, created, crowdsourcing campaign. They have done small pocket greening in several areas, and like the story continues. So thank you. This was it.
Thank you, Dipti, for such a powerful and inspiring presentation. I mean, it's really wonderful to see how, in the Indian context, community participation is evolving from a hopeful ideal to an integral part of the development process. And it's also interesting, how Prachi in the Europe, like kind of thinking about this eco-centric sort of a framework. And then also on the other side, in India, like you are actually working with community on nature-based solutions. And it also clearly highlights how we are connected, and that's why it's a great platform, which also establishes the fact that as professionals, how we are looking towards similar goals in different parts of the world, and we cannot perform in isolation. We all have to perform in a connected way, right? So now moving back to our second presenter, but also unfortunately now the last presenter, Manda, I guess, who is also working with public sector in the UK and with a lot of participation. So over to you, Manda. I guess now we can see your slide. So yeah, the floor is yours.
You can see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm conscious of time. So what I'm going to do is talk about just bear with me. Good. Talk about these 5 aspects of the work I've done in local authorities. So in the council context, I think we have got different roles and capabilities, but the first and foremost, which people are familiar with, is the regulatory side. So we make plans, we approve planning applications, we also do master plans, development plans. So that's one aspect. The role which I'm enjoying more over the last 10 years or so is looking at when council or public sector land is huge asset, and it's often underplayed in the whole context of city making. So I think where public sector owns the land is where one can make the huge impact in terms of either working with private sector or doing the direct delivery of projects. And that's the one which has been mostly sort of my work in the last 10 years or so. The third aspect is also bringing together.
Manda, for interrupting, can you please make the screen full? We are seeing the other screen actually.
Okay, so this is the screen, right? Yeah, good. Is it full now?
No.
Can you at least see this?
Yeah, we have this is usually the speaker screen, right? So we have the notes and stuff. So do you have?
Okay. Is it better?
Yeah, this is better. Yeah.
Yeah. So the third is sort of bringing together all of the different aspects of regeneration. From highways to parks to community-led engagement, community projects. So that's what we call as area-based community projects. And the fourth side is a capacity building, because we as an urban designer or urban planner in the local authority, are part of a much bigger organization. I think in terms of budgets and focus, the main aspect at least in the UK is social services and environment. So highways take up a lot of budget, highways and your kind of hard main infrastructure. And the second side is social infrastructure, providing homes, healthcare, school. So how the most impact urban designers will have if we try and find ways and alignment into tapping into all different wider agenda of council, because urban design is seen in a quite a sort of a limited capacity. People see that as a kind of part of development. And lastly, it's again, the example I'll talk about in Ealing is about inward investment. So making Ealing the place for investment. Okay, what's going on? So Ealing, for the familiarity of where it is, it's in West London. So we are perfectly positioned between Heathrow and Central London. And the big transformation opportunity for Ealing was when Elizabeth Line was delivered. So Elizabeth Line is cross east-west new train line, opened in 2021. But Ealing was beneficiary of 5 new stations, which connect Heathrow, but also Canary Wharf, Liverpool Street, so east and west, and a brand new infrastructure. So on the back of 5 new Elizabeth Line stations, the focus at the time by Ealing was very much on how we can provide more homes and transit-oriented developments on the other station. There were plans to do homes-led development. But what was also quite interesting, and this is our current sort of vision diagram, is alongside is also large swathes of industrial land. And industrial land, this being Outer London Borough, Outer London Council, industrial land has always been there, but that industrial land now comes under pressure, and how we can use our productive landscape to support the economy. Ealing as a council is not without its challenges. It's got high level of affordable homes requirements. We've got large people living in temporary accommodation.
So sorry, Minder, just for are you actually changing the slides, or is it
Yeah,
just
it's not showing.
no?
I think I need to.
Yeah,
I don't know.
now it's yeah.
Now it's a smaller screen, so I don't know how to do it. Okay, is it visible now? Is it
Yeah,
moving
this is visible
forward?
now. We can see it. Yeah.
Okay. But if I go into full screen mode, I think it changes. So there is something going on with the screen screen setting. Okay, I think what I will talk about is the way if this is now on the council plan
Yes.
Context, and I'll keep it this way because otherwise we'll just lose the flow. So in the council plan, so where we work in the local authority is the plan, like the statutory plan, master plan, comes. It's part of the process, but also we are taking forward the political agenda. So what is the political and ambitions for the council as a whole, and then planning and governance and development forms part of it. So the 3 things where currently we have been working on for the last 5 years are under creating jobs. So jobs is the kind of driver, tackling climate crisis and fighting inequality. Now under all of these, the way to work is to find alliances or commonalities between where does your urban planning and urban design sit. So what are your alliances? Where you can find in tackling climate changes, what are the opportunities you can deliver? So for us, one of the starting point was when I started at Ealing for 3.5 years ago, was one of the line was around creating equitable growth across 7 towns. So Ealing as a borough is not one big place. It's made up of 7 towns, historic towns, which come together, and that's called of London Borough of Ealing. So we started looking at, and this was the time just post-COVID. So the sort of the narrative around 15-minute city, 20-minute cities were very much kind of top of the thinking. So we started looking at the polycentric approach to Ealing of and we created 7 frameworks for looking at each town and this is, this is like a bread and butter for any urban designer, urban planner. Look at socioeconomic data, undertake engagement, look at what are the drivers, and then based on those principles, there are a set of infrastructure and delivery plans associated. So we have these for 7 towns. What I'm going to do today is talk briefly about an example which is perhaps more relatable for all of us, being from India, is Southall. So Southall is the edge, the westernmost side of Ealing. And Southall is, as it comes to mind, everyone knows about sort of South Asian high street, Punjabi culture, a lot of large Indian diaspora community. But then when we dig deeper into the statistics and data, so I think the one on the foremost is, and we are still building these capabilities. So we had good understanding of GIS and spatial data, but the data council collects, which is in public health, which is in deprivation, which is in your climate resilience, it's not joined up. So one of the first things we did was, look at this place lens and looked at all of these aspects. So this showed some of those challenging trends of, younger people, higher levels of younger people, but some of them are deprived, education of school, spend and economy as well. Where is the money spent? Who earns what? So based on that, and then going back to the sort of your physical and morphology and urban design thinking, looking back at the history, the way everyone perceives Southall is as if at it is today. But going back, it was a place of great history, but also a place of manufacturing, factories. And then the 60s and 70s saw large waves of immigration, and the most recent was in 90s. But that had an impact on how the demographic makeup is. In terms of place, high levels of open spaces, but also beautiful assets of canals by the edge of it. And then the second aspect is the very interesting religious places of worship landscape. Again, for the UK, where it's more the faith places of worship are probably, a lot of churches are vacant or trying to reimagine and reuse. Southall is a place which has got 25 different active, large places of worship, and that's seen as a good asset. The second thing, what was quite interesting, is what goes within the industrial land. So housing, I think we all have good understanding of housing and demographics, but within what we classify as industrial land, we did detailed audit of every single business, their employment base, but also in terms of the jobs they are providing. So this, those 4 or 5 industrial areas form the basis of what we were doing. And then in this 2022, that whole decision to shift the change from being a housing led to being economic led regeneration gave us the remit. So the work which I have been doing, and this is not my team's work, this is a collective work of 7 or 8 different teams within the council, which comes under part of Southall Regeneration Program. And what you will see is this whole sort of layers of planning. So, Southall have had 5 or 6 different planning documents prepared over the last decade. Now decoding it, unpicking it, understanding what's really important. And from that, we have set these 4 or 5 key principles. And they, in summary, they relate to tackling infrastructure requirements and placemaking. So the physical aspect of planning and delivery. The second one is around kind of connecting communities, so looking at community assets. And the third one is making the culture the front and center of Southall, because I think the culture and people, without that, we can't achieve it. So looking at the physical context, it's quite challenging. Again, these numbers are probably not as ambitious or as grand as city scale in India, but 8,000 homes in a small town for London is quite big development. And then looking at it in terms of scale and overall urban scale, all of those sites are centered around the station, and there is a master plan. There are sort of frameworks, but we also are seeing changes in the employment employment need. For example, the biggest change in the last 2 or 3 years has been big demand of data centers. And data centers are, take up big land, consume energy, but also they don't employ as many people. And how do we kind of address some of these newer challenges? So this is the sort of scale to give you the sense of scale of what's planned around the station. And we have 3D model, we do all the kind of analysis, and this is all being planned clearly. But where the gap was that it wasn't a partnership working. So each development was doing its own part, and then there was planning and design for shared areas like public rail. But what I did in the last, me and my team did in the last couple of years is brought all of those developers together, and we've now working jointly in terms of our shared implementation plan. So it's in everyone's interest that what you are doing on your site is meeting your requirements of people. I mean, for a developer, they want to build, sell, and move on. But I think for us, this is the long-term community. So what we are doing now is going to set the scene for next 10, 15 years. So this concept of 20-minute neighborhood, looking at mapping of facilities of where is your local health center? Is the school within the walking distance? Are there enough parks and open spaces? So this has been ongoing work. The second strand is around health and well-being, creating open spaces. And this is again goes back to the data analysis of, the stark challenging things of, the pressure. I think, and everyone is hearing about NHS, but this is more about prevention. So what we can do today to encourage active lifestyles, to encourage more people to walk and cycle, but also then prevent the future risk of health. So this whole other around sort of £8 or £9 million of investment program into active travel routes, cycling, walking. There is a social movement which is community-led called as Let's Go Southall. They are doing excellent work. The second aspect of health and well-being is also open spaces. So again, using Southall's unique context of canals and also large open spaces, there are new areas created for wetlands and a sustainable urban drainage, and also outdoor gyms and active travel. And lastly, Southall, I think, as a place is brimming with culture, but the challenge is it's currently only attracting people of South Asian heritage or those who have a connection to Indian sort of cultural side. Now, how can we make this open to the wider landscape? And I think the culture is often there are three sides to it, and this is just a short. So we did a Ealing-wide research, but three sides to it is one, there are these places of art galleries, cinemas, and events. We call it culture spaces for consumption. And then there is a production, where things are made, film studios, the production, your set design, music labs. And there are sites to community. So we mapped all of those. And then there is now a plan specifically for Southall. But also there is a large culture of informal cultural spaces, people working in their back garages, producing music. There is a whole array of virtual music collections. So the garage, the music, and also what gets played out in public realm. So the festivals, the Baisakhi took place. There will be more festivals coming up. So bringing all this together, we have done the mapping of Southall's culture, and I think so. This is sort of urban design more from the lens of community-led regeneration program and tackling these three aspects of placemaking, infrastructure, health and well-being, and culture. And this is where the boundaries are blurred between what is urban design and what would be conventionally seen as urban design and planning, and bringing it all together. And this is where the things where we need to do more work in Ealing is using council assets. So we still own quite a few parcels of land in Ealing, in Southall. And this is where, could those plots of land, is it best to do it as open space? Or is it those lands best provided for affordable homes? Or completely something else, community center or the next theater? So that's my last slide. And sorry for technical issues with Zoom. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mandar. I guess because we are really almost towards the end of the session, I will quickly invite all the speakers and will hand it over to our moderator, Prachi, for a short panel discussion, maybe like not more than 10 minutes. But yeah, Prachi, over to you.
Thanks, Devayan. No, it was a great array of speakers that you have arranged. So just diving in diving into the panel discussion, and to kick things off, I had basically a question for each speaker, and hopefully that will spark some discussion as well. So I'll start with Jürgen. I hope I got your name right. It was
Yeah,
a
that's good.
lovely it was a lovely presentation, really informative, and I think my question to you would be, it was great seeing the evolution of Frankfurt, and obviously, the city comes with a lot of rich assets, which has kind of been strengthened over time. But in your view, is there anything that Frankfurt could or should do differently?
Well, of course, every city can do something different. That's the nature of a place, and it's always the question what's right or wrong. What I like about the city, it has over the years and all the decades really taken planning seriously, and there's a high degree of certainty, actually, I believe, that there's a certain rigor behind. Of course, the high-rise master plan took forever. It took way too long. That's absolutely right, and that needs to be improved. But I don't think it was a question of, for instance, the city planning authority. It was much more a question of politics behind it, and that was something which should have been improved. Having said that, at the end of the day, as I said, I like the consistency of planning principles behind and everything that has guided the growth of Frankfurt. And it's by dynamic, the second most dynamic place in Germany still. Just Berlin is more dynamic, but then Frankfurt comes. Also, one asset is, of course, which I to mention is the airport as a key economic driver. Now that I heard also the question on Heathrow, so yes, that it's good. The consistency time, as many processes in Germany are really bad. We need to get faster. We need to not have all these long durations of decision making.
That's
an easy win.
Yeah, that is always a challenge, I guess. It's a common challenge we all face no matter where we are working on. And I think that very neatly ties into the next question that I actually have for Mandar. I think it's kind of because what you were talking about, Jürgen, about consistency and continuity in planning, that can have fundamental impacts on how a place develops over time. So, Mandar, the question for you. I'm not sure if we can see you. Can we see you? Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, we can see you now. Great. So it was, it was a very detailed presentation in terms of overview of what London Borough of Ealing is undertaking. It's a kind of very ambitious, and it's great to see sort of a very rich, sort of a multi-layered strategy of improving the place and improving the neighborhood. But linked with continuity in planning, I think my question was, how does London Borough of Ealing sort of overcome the pressures that come with short political cycles, or that come with the short-terminism of developers, like you mentioned, they want to develop and go. How do you approach that? How do you overcome that, particularly when you have health and well-being agenda, which needs a longer-term approach to place?
I think it is, city making is part of the politics is part of it, but the politicians are locally elected representatives. It's like you and me who elect them, so we need to work with them. I think currently for London, it's a good place to be because of the alignment between London, the mayor of London, and then the national government. So in terms of politics, and there isn't that petty politics people play. And in that long-term sense, I think no matter which side of the elections or party politicians you are, I think at the end of it, it's very much sort of rooted in a place and residents and their priorities. So probably the flavor of the month may change, but the fundamentals of everyone wants a good, safe home. Everyone wants to have nice open spaces and parks and streets and schools. So I think those are probably beyond politics boundary. I think in terms of the developers and the short-termism, probably is being again, my sort of the second hat I wear, which is the inward investment side. So being very clear with any investors or developers about what our expectations are. At the end of it, it's a capital market. People acquire land, they develop it. But those who have long-term interest in Ealing, they get preferential treatment, and we work as a partners. And this is where both sides. So if a developer, I think developer industry is not without its challenges. There are capital flows, but for example, where we can bring some where we have skin in the game, we manage to forge long-term partnerships, and it's easier on large sites. So probably small sites will always be speculative, but larger sites, which has got 5-year, 10-year investment cycle, they want to work with the government, they want to work with partners, and also community, because it's a reputational issue for majority of the listed developers in the UK. But I agree. It's I think the biggest challenge in the last few years has been the Ukraine-Russia war. For UK, it's the Brexit. Since Brexit, the whole market changed, and it's just everyone is still guessing what it will do to demographics. So it's very difficult to plan long term. It's been still like 3 to 4 year cycle. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. I think it was really, really helpful to get a perspective of, someone who is actually working in the public sector and sort of rooting for that long-term approach. I think this leads me to the question for Deepthi. It was such an inspiring presentation, Deepthi, and such a lovely project. I think my question really was sort of just focusing. I mean, your presentation outlined really well the kind of the challenges or the barriers and how they were obviously overcome, but in the context of development in India is very different from context of development in the UK or in Europe. And how do you navigate? So, for instance, if you come across barriers related to, say, a conflict in political ambitions when it comes to microgreening or retrofitting green spaces, or it comes to how do you, sort of inculcating the spirit of community for long-term maintenance of those spaces once, you've done your role, you've handed over the spaces back to the community. How do you ensure long-term stewardship of those places? Does funding continue? Do organizations continue the funding of those of the management regime, or how does it work in India?
Yeah, thanks for this question, and very, very pertinent question for the projects that we are doing. And really, to be honest, when we began working on the project, the maintenance part was not the first question that we thought of. Because of philanthropic funding, which was for 1 year, we thought that it probably would have a certain kind of a budget that we can set aside for maintenance. However, by the end of the implementation, we realized that's not the luxury that we have for this project. So then, how do you kind of create a maintenance sort of a model? This we then started. We had a workshop actually of all different stakeholders from there, yes, but also all different NGOs that have tried to do this. Because once a pilot is kind of created, what are the legal kind of mechanisms in place to make sure that it's maintained in the long term? So and it actually changes from one project to the other. So for example, the project that I showed today, where the Society Federation itself is an organization, right? There are conflicts in terms of the handover, of the buildings to the society, because it was a rehab resettlement colony. So during the transition, can there be charters that are created? Can there be legal binding so that the handover of the maintenance eventually goes on to the community? Here currently, they were instrumental in even funding the water pipeline for the maintenance, just by their own funds of the society funds. So there they already took that initiative, because they started, they were part of the process. They were in fact the leading actors. But that may not, that may vary from one place to the other. especially and again, it's connected to the land ownership. It's connected to, which government is maintaining that place, and then how systematically through the budgets can one allot, allot budgets for such projects moving forward. So those are some of the, very kind of step-by-step approach that we've been, and that's what the slide actually towards the end suggested, that within the budget, how do you take care of this, at least as a subsidy in the beginning, and then slowly kind of, handing it over to the societies who can take care of it through their own funding. And more often you will see that there is so much excitement actually when a space like that is created, which is so not there otherwise. There is a lot of ownership and there is a lot of contribution that comes in. Again, the contribution doesn't need to be very, very big. There are really small contributions that come into, in terms of just stewardship, or people who like greening are coming there to just maintain it. So those smaller kind of things that we have seen through our projects happening, but really institutionally, which department can can these components of maintenance be plugged in is where we are heading towards. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. I think all the answers and the discussion that we've had so far kind of highlights the importance of all the aspects which are not mainstream design but are critical in making good design possible. So things like land ownership, maintenance and management, stewardship strategy, the economics of development, the institutional processes. So as urban designers, we have to navigate through all of that whilst keeping the focus of good design center stage. So I think on that note, I'll hand it over to Debayan. It was lovely seeing all the presentations, and just conscious it's a Saturday, so I won't take up much of everyone's time.
Thank you. I guess in the chat box there are two questions for Mandar, but I guess Mandar, if you would like to, I mean, I saw you already replied, but maybe you would like to touch upon the questions.
Yeah, I think there is one on data center which I'll reply to, but I think, yeah,
Mandar.
Sachin.
Hi, Mandar.
Yeah, go on.
This is Anubandh here, and I'm taking a very opportunistic way of interjecting, and I'm extremely sorry to entire IODI team. We both are very good friends. Me and Mandar, we were roommates at some point of time, and co-workers, and we are separated by 7 seas. But I'm very thankful to the IODI platform to sort of make us at least connect through this online platform. Mandar, you answered my question. Thank you very much. That's all. And sorry for the interjection and disturbance.
No, thank you. Good to see you, Anuban. Great. Yeah, I think on data center, it's the combination of where the energy is. So rather than the inner London or outer London or outskirts is where the power supply is. And in the last 6 months or a year, I've learned so much on data centers, because they are going to happen, and we need to turn them into more of a force for the betterment. So the effort we are trying, so Sachin, in terms of locations within the central, there is a big sort of concentration around in Slough, because that's where the main line comes in from the Europe. I think the 2 data centers planned in Southall, the example I gave, what we are working with those 2 big, and they're hyperscale data centers, so 400 megawatt. The vision and the work we are doing is, it's a big investment. They've got a lot of money, first of all. But then what we're doing is, how can we use this to also have skills side of it, skills and innovation, and also work with schools because data center this is the next wave of, training and skills. So I think turning them into the more probably places in terms of institution, as you see it, places for skills and investment. So yeah, but there is, I think there is a demand everywhere, and data center will go. And with the AI now, there is a big demand on this sector. Thanks, Devayan. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So our time for session 4 is almost up, and with that we must bring this engaging and insightful conversation to a close. But this is truly just the beginning. We look forward to continuing such meaningful discussions through our upcoming events across all chapters and centers of IUDI in the second half of the year. So as we wrap up, I would like to invite Mr. Vikas Kanodia, who is IUDI Treasurer, to deliver the concluding remarks and vote of thanks to officially close today's session. Heartful thank you to everyone who joined us today. Please stay connected with us. Feel free to email us your queries. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Instagram for updates on all our upcoming events. So Vikas, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Devayan. I really feel honored and privileged for this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks on the occasion of IUDI Foundation Day. All the four sessions were really intriguing, and especially the second session for me was quite good because it showed, how technology can be brought in for, digital analysis of cities. I mean, at the same time, the audience did raise very valid, pertinent questions. Of history. Suppose it's a river. How do you look at the river? Shifting, as well as we also are doing certain waterfronts, so even digitally, the water is read as a surface. So you don't know, how to map the what lies beneath the water, which is very important for any waterfront activities. So very interesting. So some of it, I think, have raised very, very important issues, as well as looking at, Deepti's presentation today, which also showed the successful as well as the unsuccessful examples. Those are very important for us to learn from. So these are the things I think we need to list out the challenges and what are the solutions given by various people, on the platform. So very, very interesting platform and very good presentations from everybody. Um, Now let me take the opportunity to first and foremost thank, our IUDI Global Group. Without them, I think this wouldn't have been possible. It is a very, very good completion and a successful completion for a 2-day symposium here on the IUDI platform. So accolades to the IUDI Global Group team. Let me take the names of all the people who are there, in the organizing team. Thank you, Devayan Chatterjee, Nikhil Shah, Akansha Vakre, Anavil Aluwalia, Yogendra Mamoria, Insia Abbas. So thank you, team. You really made the symposium. You did it a very, very meticulous planning to present and get some of the very, very best of the academicians and practicing for professionals from various part of the world. So thank you. I thank all the speakers and moderators for their insightful presentation and for sharing their knowledge and wisdom on this IUDI platform. The presentations were able to generate intriguing conversations, debate, and reflections from the audience. Uh, and last but not the least, thanks to all the attendants for their participation and being there for these 2 days of thoughtful and intriguing symposium. We look forward to hear from you. You can write to us and give your suggestions and reflections. So thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.